Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. I've got to give this guy a name, even though I can't use his real one. Let's call him Jake. Jake was a wife beater, plain and simple. I was hired by Jake's former brother-in-law, the sibling of the wife Jake used to pummel. This client was also Jake's ex-business partner from way back, so not only did he despise Jake for abusing his sister, but they had a nasty falling out over some business dealings too. My client took Jake to court and I got handed the case. Jake and his legal team fought me tooth and nail. He arrogantly thought his lies and bold-faced perjury would win out like always before. His deceit had even scored him a cushy divorce settlement from his ex with zero child support, so maybe he figured more intimidation would do the trick again. But he was dead wrong this time. After the trial, I had him nailed with a massive judgment that he could never pay off in full. Jake squirmed and thrashed, but I steadily located and stripped away every asset he owned. It was almost too easy. Jake never considered any consequences, so he didn't lawyer up until way too late. My clients are always prepped for battle before the first shot's even fired. But dumbass Jake waited until the court papers got thrown at his feet before getting representation. By then, it was all over but the crying. I churned through Jake's holdings like a trash compactor. After a while, he only had one measly property left. A rental house he was desperately clinging to as his sole income source. Jake had to live in that dump's unfinished basement while he survived off what the upstairs tenants paid for rent. He'd shady cash those rent checks at loan shark places, eating the huge fees just to keep the money away from my garnishments on any bank account he opened. For a stretch, Jake managed to hide that rental from me by using some numbered company as the owner. But my investigator eventually spotted him one day and trailed him right back to that house. Jake represented himself through the next couple of years as I punched through his corporate smokescreen and fake asset transfers. In the end, though, I seized his precious rental, the last property he had left. One day, Jake stepped out for a pack of smokes, and when he got back, the sheriff had already changed all the locks. "Can my client at least crash in the basement?" asked Jake's sad sack pro bono lawyer I'd dealt with locally before. As we spoke, I could see right into the guy's crummy office window across the lot from my high-rise. "Ask the new owner," I told him flatly. "It's out of my hands now." I explained that the new proprietor, just one of my client's employees used as a proxy, would be barring Jake from that squalid basement apartment for good. After spending his life as a prosperous man about town, Jake had just been stripped of the very last thing he owned. Except for his truck, at least. He did still have that junker pickup left. Jake's truck was this giant rusted tub of a gas guzzler he always hauled himself around in. Too old and busted to be worth taking, so I left him that one threadbare possession out of mercy. Turned out to be a good call, too, as that's where Jake started living once he lost access to the basement. Until he screwed that up and lost his truck as well, that is. He got his truck seized the day I got a call from the new tenants at his old rental house. "He came back and blocked the whole driveway by parking his truck across it," one tenant said frantically. Then Jake just stormed off, ranting about coming back later to sleep in his truck tonight. The truck was completely blocking their exit, so I rang up a tow truck driver I used to use back when I did criminal defense work. Within a couple hours, that heap was hoisted away to a special lot location I designated. "My guy needs his truck back," Jake's pro bono lawyer demanded the next day over the phone. "Not happening," I stated firmly. I stood at my office's huge windows 15 floors up, probably looking down into that parking lot right in front of the pro bono guy's rinky-dink office space. "But you have no claim on his truck," he protested. "And he had no right to block someone's driveway," I countered sharply. It felt strangely cosmic, issuing such verdicts from on high that would leave this man with absolutely nothing, like I was some all-powerful deity banishing a mere mortal to oblivion. "So you're really going to make me take this to court over a truck?" the pro bono guy huffed. "Do whatever you've got to," I said coolly. He vowed his client would be in the next day to file an affidavit so they could pursue the truck legally. I wasn't too worried about it. The very next morning, I stood by those tall windows sipping my coffee as the sunrise gleamed through the glass. My phone buzzed. It was pro bono man again, sounding absolutely livid now. "Why didn't you tell me Jake's truck was parked right outside my office?" he raged. I could almost see the vein pulsing on his forehead. "Is that so?" I replied innocently. "How careless of my bailiff to leave Jake's truck somewhere he could so easily retrieve it. I really must have a talk with him about that. This isn't a joke. My client's going to sue your ass for this stunt." "No, he really isn't," I stated firmly. "Tell your client to get in that truck right now and drive away while he still can. I had my guy fill up the tank and do a gratis oil change too as a courtesy. But if I ever see that truck again, I'm seizing it to settle the rest of the judgment against him." The pro bono idiot kept ranting, but I just hung up and enjoyed the rest of my morning coffee by the grand window vista. A few minutes later, I spotted Jake himself leaving the pro bono office and shuffling over to his truck, completely deflated. All the cocky arrogance was gone. He was a broken man now. I've ruined many guys in my career, but Jake was the only one whose total defeat I witnessed personally like this, looking down from the heights of my high-rise perch. I watched as he climbed into that dilapidated truck, the only belonging I mercifully allowed him to keep in the end. Jake turned the engine over, spitting out thick clouds of exhaust as he finally drove off. I was sure I'd never hear from that loser again, and I never did. The next one is an entitled people story. I've lived on my family's land for as long as I can remember. The rolling green hills and crystal clear lake on the property always brought me immense joy. I inherited the land from my grandfather, who worked tirelessly for decades to cultivate the once barren plot into a little slice of paradise. After college, I decided to move back to the old homestead and try my hand at running the small produce farm my grandpa had started. Those first few years were full of trials and tribulations, but with some perseverance, I managed to carry on his legacy. The farm flourished, and before long, I had more fresh vegetables than I knew what to do with. Sharing the bounty with my community became my favorite part of the job. I'd load up my truck each week and head into town, handing out free produce to families in need. Seeing the smiles light up their faces filled my heart with so much gladness. I couldn't imagine a better life. That is, until she showed up. Karen. I'll never forget the first time I saw her luxury SUV rolling down the dirt road leading to my property. This shiny black beast of a vehicle looked oddly out of place, rumbling along next to my weathered old pickup. I squinted against the glaring sun as it came to a stop in my driveway. Out stepped a woman dressed from head to toe in designer brands, Karen. Her nose crinkled in distaste as she looked around the farm, clearly unimpressed with the simplicity of it all. I greeted her politely and asked if I could help her with something. "Yes, you can help by telling me who owns this dreadful bit of land. I wish to purchase it immediately," she declared arrogantly. I explained that the land had been in my family for generations and that it was not for sale. Karen did not take kindly to the rejection. She insisted that she needed the property as it was the perfect spot for her to build a luxury mansion and accompanying stables. No amount of declining seemed to get through to her. After that first interaction, Karen became a regular nuisance. She'd show up unannounced and snoop around, snapping photos and taking measurements. It was almost like she was surveying the land in preparation for building. I started to worry she had sinister plans in mind. One day I returned from making deliveries to see bulldozers and construction equipment rolling onto the property. Horrified, I rushed over to find Karen directing a crew as they broke ground on my land. She had the audacity to grin smugly and tell me she was building her dream home, whether I liked it or not. I immediately called the police to report the trespassing and illegal construction, but Karen had somehow finagled temporary permits and got the project approved by greasing the palms of the right people. I was furious. This could not be legal, but she insisted it was a done deal. Over the next few weeks, I watched helplessly as Karen's vulgar monstrosity of a mansion began taking shape on my once pristine land. She had raised acres of trees and vegetation to make way for a sprawling Italian-style villa complete with manicured gardens, stables, and even a helipad. It was a hideous assault on the natural beauty of the farm. Meanwhile, Karen and her construction crew kept me blocked from accessing large portions of my property. She even had the audacity to sue me for getting in the way of her approved building plans. I was at my wit's end and worried I may never get my land back from this deranged woman. Finally, I decided enough was enough. I scraped together every last penny I had to hire the meanest, toughest lawyer around to fight Karen and her elaborate schemes. This battle-hardened legal eagle managed to get Karen's permits overturned on technicalities and shut down the entire site for extensive code violations. Her bribes hadn't covered all the necessary approvals after all. The ensuing court case was long and messy. Karen used every dirty trick imaginable, but my legal gladiator kept hammering away at her poorly constructed web of lies and fraud. In the end, the judge ruled entirely in my favor. Karen's mansion was deemed illegal, and she was ordered to return my land to its original pastoral state. The look of utter shock on Karen's face when the verdict was read was absolutely priceless. Watching her dreams crumble gave me immense satisfaction after the hell she had put me through. The courts imposed massive fines as well, ensuring her little misadventure cost her dearly. In the following weeks, I watched in delight as her vulgar mansion was bulldozed to the ground. Her extravagant stables met a similar fate. The bits of my land she had managed to taint were painstakingly rehabilitated, new saplings planted, vegetation resuscitated. Finally, my property was back in my hands, looking as beautiful as ever thanks to nature's resilience. Karen's schemes had failed miserably, thwarted by justice and karma. She slunk away, broke and humiliated. As for me, I'm just happy to carry on my grandpa's legacy in peace. The land provides and nourishes, just as it has for generations. And I'll continue sharing its bounty with my community, unperturbed by the likes of Karen or anyone else who tries to destroy our little slice of heaven. The next one is a petty revenge story. I worked as the lumber opener at Home Depot. The night crew ended their shift an hour later after I arrived. Every day I would see the crew preparing products except for one guy. He was always sweeping between the aisles or mopping, which seemed out of place as we contracted with a janitorial service. I decided to ask how and why he was assigned this work. This is his story. The guy was hired as part of the overnight shift. One evening, he was injured. The injury wasn't serious, but not minuscule. Due to the large turnover of employees, the supervisor inquired if the guy could stay until the shift ended due to the large amount of tasks requiring completion. The guy agreed and completed the shift. A few days later, the guy was at a family reunion. He shared the story with relatives, including his uncle, who is a lawyer. Even though his uncle did not specialize in work injuries, the uncle was aware the shift manager was required to send the guy home immediately, and asking him to stay was illegal. The uncle explained the reason for such laws and offered to represent the guy for free. These cases are frequently addressed by a settlement rather than court. With initial hesitation, the guy agreed. The result was a settlement. I inquired as the amount which the guy could not provide due to signing an NDA, but did confirm the amount was higher than most assumed. I repeated the original question with more emphasis. Why was this guy still working at Home Depot? He smiled and answered. As long as he arrived to work and completed his tasks, Home Depot could not fire him. His uncle had said to immediately contact if the job was terminated, as another lawsuit would occur. The termination easily could be viewed as retribution to the settlement. Home Depot slowly lessened the guy's hours and assigned menial tasks as they anticipated the guy's patience would end. The guy informed that he didn't need the job anymore and finally had the money to attend college due to the settlement. However, in the months prior to college beginning, he would continue to work at Home Depot because his refusal to quit enraged the management/company. I laughed and thought, this guy is a legend. The next one is a malicious compliance story. First, a little context, backstory. I, a 19-year-old man, am a severely closeted trans man, FTM. I recently moved to the US from Africa. I will not specify where for safety reasons, to study abroad. In reality, I moved in hopes of escaping the anti-LGBT laws and the sad reality of being queer in Africa. I hoped in America I could find a future where I could truly live as myself. Spoiler alert, I didn't. Not only does it seem like America hates trans people as much as Africa, but also my family here seems to be 10 times more strict, closed-minded, and traditional than my family back home. For those who don't know, being an international student is expensive as heck. My family is not poor, but we are not covered in wealth either. So, to be able to live here, I needed to move in with my family in America, at least for the time being. Now, to the actual story. A year ago, my cousin graduated from community college and was going to transfer to another university to complete their degree. We are all taking this route because it's cheaper. Naturally, we all had to attend said graduation. And people from immigrant families can probably relate. But my family insisted on being well-dressed, overdressed, for the occasion. I hate dresses with all my heart. I have hated them for as long as I can remember, even long before I realized I was trans. I hate how I look. I hate how they make me feel, and it feels like I'm on the verge of a panic attack every time I'm forced to wear one, especially in public. You can probably tell where this is going. I was forced to wear one for the graduation. You cannot fight or talk back to your elders in my culture, no matter how old you are. I tried to protest as much as possible, but the decision was final. I genuinely wanted to unalive myself that day. Anyways, this year was my graduation, and I knew since last year that the same thing will proceed. My family will ask me what I have to wear for my graduation, and even if I had a perfectly nice suit that was appropriate for the occasion, they'll force me to go dress shopping and wear one to it. But this year, I came prepared. I didn't mention it earlier, but for over a year and a half now, I've been on a weight loss and bodybuilding journey. In fact, the whole incident last year has made me double down and work out even harder. Losing weight and building muscle has been a way to help me manage my body dysphoria. Not only do I now look more masculine, but I look pretty cool with muscles too. Like said earlier, my family is very traditional, so they live by certain gender expectations. And one thing they absolutely hate is masculine girls and feminine boys. They hate muscular girls with a burning passion, saying it looks ugly or unnatural. So, this year, when they brought up dress shopping for my graduation, I didn't even put up a fight. I went along like nothing was wrong. While dress shopping, I purposely picked the most tight-fitting dresses, sleeveless ones, and even unattractive ones. I've been able to hide my body progress this whole time by only wearing loose and baggy clothes around the house. So, when it came time to try on the dresses and I came out of the dressing room, the pure look of disgust on their faces is one I cannot describe. I had to try so hard to not burst out laughing in the moment. While I am not the most muscular person out there, I still looked pretty buff in those dresses. Simply put, I looked like a man in those dresses, and they hated that ha 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 ha. The worst part is that they could not even complain about my body, because my weight has always been an issue and talking point in my family, so even though they hated how I looked, at least I lost weight, so they cannot complain. I was even considering lat spreading as I came out of the dressing room, but that might have pushed it too far. Anyway, long story short, they hated every single dress and allowed me to wear my suit, which I looked much better in. And now, even though I won, I constantly get comments about working out too much from them. On the bright side, since I graduated, I am finally moving out after summer. Hopefully, with more freedom and less fear, things will be different this time. The next one is an entitled people's story. So I don't know if this is the right subreddit, but it seemed like it fit here the most. So yesterday, I decided to take a walk to the shops. I love to walk even though it's about 10 minutes away. On my way there, I noticed that a giant part of the road had been dug up. The asphalt chunks were on the walkway, clearly visible to anyone, and the workers had placed a caution marker in the middle of the road. My guess is that they had placed some pipes under the road, given that it was about 2 meters wide and spanned the entire 2-lane road. It was a pretty deep hole though, but not deep enough to harm a car if they slowly drove through it. This is in the suburbs, so there were only a few cars that were taking their time to get over the ditch. I hadn't paid it any mind and continued to do my walk to the store. On my way back, I had noticed there were a few more cars backed up behind the ditch and they were moving super slowly. There was one guy that was leaning on his horn, waving his arms sporadically, and he was clearly upset. This guy was also in one of those super low-to-the-ground cars, think rich person in the middle of a midlife crisis kind of cars. I had to get to the other side of the road though, and I waited until the line had come to a brief full stop. I did a quick check to see if there were any oncoming cars and ran over to the other side of the street. Remember, this is the suburbs, there is no crossing, and it's completely legal in my area to just cross the street. I, of course, had made the mistake of doing this right in front of Mr. Impatient. He honked his horn even more and yelled something out of his window. I just ignored him and kept on walking. A few seconds later, and right by the ditch, Mr. Impatient comes flying past me on the wrong side of the street and yells at me, "And duck you too!" while hanging out of his window. He hadn't even finished his yell when he drove smack into that ditch. It was a super loud bang, and he was skidding to a halt. His entire front bumper was completely destroyed, and who knows what other unseen damage there was. I just raised an eyebrow and noticed a lady in an SUV laughing hysterically. I kept my cool and just continued my walk. Once I was around the block, I had to sit down to laugh. Karma, don't mess with her. The next one is an entitled parents story. This is more entitled grandparents, but I don't know where else to put this. For some context, my maternal grandfather, who I've been estranged from for a while now, passed away last month. I refused to attend the funeral because I didn't feel comfortable being around that side of my family since they were always cruel to my siblings and I. Well, yesterday I got a call from my grandmother about inheritance. In all seriousness, I had zero expectation on that front since my grandfather didn't exactly like me. However, he apparently did leave me something in his will, though I'll never be able to collect it. He set a certain clause, I don't think what it's called, for me to be allowed to receive it. The conversation went as followed. GM = grandmother, me = me GM. I'm sorry you couldn't make the funeral, OP. Me. I didn't go because you told me I couldn't. GM. No, I said your friend couldn't. Me. He's my husband. I'm not doing this again with you. GM. Fine. Anyways, I wanted to talk to you about your inheritance. Me. Inheritance? Grandfather hated me. What the hell would he leave me? GM. I'm not sure. The attorney said it was meant for your eyes only by his wishes. Me. Okay? GM. However, there are a couple things you're required to do before you receive it. Me. Which would be? GM. You have to divorce your husband and marry a woman. Approved by me, of course. I already know a lovely girl that would be willing. Me. What? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Absolutely not. GM. But you have to, otherwise you can't have your inheritance. Me. I don't care. I never wanted anything from that man. You can keep the stupid inheritance. I don't want it, and I don't want to talk to you anymore. GM. Oh, stop being dramatic. You're just like your mother. I hung up and haven't heard anything since. I don't know if what she said was true, but I don't care. Even if I had been able to claim the inheritance, I wouldn't have. I talked to my mom today and she told me she got an angry call from grandmother about me being unreasonable and disrespectful. She fully supported me telling my grandmother no. My siblings have also said they received similar calls about inheritance and also refused. We plan to all finally fully cut contact with that side of the family, and honestly, we should have sooner. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.